Hello and welcome to the Low Carb Conversations podcast. I am your host, Holly Jean, and I am joined with Leah today for our co-host episode. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm good. Thanks.
All right. So today in our co-host episode, we are going to go over the last few guests that we have had. We'll do a recap of them, and then we are going to talk about some nutrition myths, which is a favorite here. It's always a favorite for us. I think it's a favorite for our listeners too, is to do some myth busting.
We love those
So
lists.
we do. And they just keep coming out. We just keep smacking them down and they keep popping back up. It's like playing whack-a-mole.
It is.
You guys have whack-a-mole?
Yeah.
There, you have that game?
I know what you mean. Yeah. I think that's what it's called.
All right, so let's jump right in. So our last few guests, first let's start off with Abby Durlawanger. She is from House of Keto. And if you guys remember, last month in our co-host episode, we did review one of the articles that actually featured her talking about mom shaming. So then we were really lucky to get her on the show right away as a guest to kind of go through and tell her side of the story of what happened in that article. Leah, what was your biggest takeaway from talking with Abby?
Really liked the whole discussion with Abby. It was great that we could get her on like so soon, just so that, give her voice to talk about what the article was saying, which was always like, how bad this mum is for feeding her children these real food. When we looked at a lunchbox, it was just like, I wish I was eating that every day. It was just like delicious foods. And I just feel like she just has a really kind of good approach to it all as well, because I feel like for me, if I was exposed like that and my family was getting death threats and so much stuff happening over the way that I was feeding children, I feel like I would be fighting back. I feel like I'd be like, you can't tell me what I can feed my children and, that kind of stuff. But she just is very confident in that approach. She learned all this stuff about sugar and what it does to the body. And she just said, I can't feed my children this. And once you know that information, you would be doing the same if you had any care for your family. And I just love that approach.
Yeah, I agree, and I had that written down as a quote where, yeah, she's like, once she learned the way she had been eating before and how unhealthy it is, she was like, I cannot in good conscience feed my children and feed my family that same way. And she really does have an excellent attitude about it. Like you said, it'd be very easy to have that knee-jerk reaction to want to fight back or push back against people making negative comments, but she really embraces it and looks at it as an opportunity to just continue educating people. So I love the conversation with her. Like I would love to just go hang out in her kitchen.
Yeah.
She's just seems so cool.
Yeah. I don't know. This
So
one she's got at the moment is like cauliflower cheese or something like that. And
I know
when it's like food porn, she pours the cheese over the top. I was like, oh, I want to be eating that.
Yeah, I saved that. I was like, I'm going to have to make this one. So yeah, definitely go back and listen to that episode, especially if you are struggling with how you're feeding your kids or getting your kids to eat better. And you yourself, or as a family, getting the family on board, because she really has a great perspective and some good tips on just how to change. And she just kind of makes it seem so much easier. Like I feel like sometimes we put a lot of stress on ourselves and how we feed our family and how we don't. And there's no guilt and there's no judgment in it. It's just, do the best you can. So go back and listen to that one. And then next we talked to fellow NTP Lucia Hawley, and we talked all about body shaming and how we should all over ourselves when we go through that cycle of mental abuse that we do sometimes, or I should eat this, or I shouldn't eat that, or I should feel this way, or I should prioritize that. And that those negative self-talk cycles and how we get programmed to think certain ways. Like it was just a really good thought-provoking kind of like deep and heartfelt conversation that we had with Lucia.
Yeah, I agree. She just had a lot of tips and practical things to kind of share with the listeners about when that's starting to happen. And, and also like taking the time to celebrate. Like I loved, we had the quote that we put out where it was basically like, she was just saying, even just stopping and thinking that you are doing that negative self-talk is like a celebration in itself. Like you've had that realization. Now you've got to take the steps to do something about it. But, some people just go through life and not even realize they're just conditioned either by things that are said to them or by things that they're exposed to in the media, and it's bombarding them. And it's subtle as well. Like it's just subtle in their thoughts. They don't even know that they're thinking that way. And yeah, we have a lot of kind of deep discussions around that.
Yeah, I like that too. She says to just kind of celebrate that acknowledgement and then take those thoughts captive. And then lastly, our latest episode, we talked to Stephanie Reeder, who is also another fellow NTP, and she is also a school educator. So our conversation with her is very timely, as here in the States, we are getting ready for back to school for the fall. And we talk about the school lunch program and school lunches and how it has changed, or actually not changed, since they started. And also some good discussion around how what our children eat affects their ability to pay attention in school and perform in school. Oops, big dog. Sorry. Leah, why don't you introduce our article and I will mute myself.
Okay. Well, Holly deals with a big dog that's coming into the room. So actually with Stephanie, there was this article that we reviewed around the history of lunches and how it all happened. And it was like an infographic kind of history of school lunches and how they started and how they've kind of like kept the same kind of pattern all these years later. And it was a lot to do with children like that consistency. And when they tried to introduce other foods that may have been a bit more healthier, children wouldn't touch those or eat those. So they had to kind of go back to the foods because eating was better than not eating. And it's just a really fascinating article. And I just urge everybody to go back and have a look at that article, because it's just a really good read, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a really good article. I agree.
And then the other article that we reviewed was around looking back in the past and to 5,000 years ago, they've been finding remnants of like babies' bottles and bits of milk, kind of, or finding lipids still in them and things like that, which can tell us more about what happened in the past and how, and they're replicating some of those things to see, I guess different scenarios to see whether that would have, how that kind of happened, so that we can learn more about the past. And there was, what was that food, Holly, that there was like roadkill and corn mush or something they were mashing up together and putting it in pots and then burying it to see kind of what I guess what minerals or what kind of chemicals would still be left, so they can take scrapings of that, so then they know what to look for in the remnants that they're finding.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't remember, but yeah, the article is so good, especially in this space, the low carb and kind of paleo space, where we are really interested in how our ancestors ate and how they made food, preserved food, used food, and like nutritionally and socially and culturally. And so that the article just kind of covered it all. It was fascinating.
Yeah. And I think it was a good discovery too. Like for me, it was interesting, was like, oh, mums did supplement their babies with animal milk back in those days, where there's been a lot of like, we never used to drink milk. So it was kind of like, kind of interesting. I thought, 5,000 years ago that they were supplementing with something anyway. So
Yeah, I think milk and dairy has always kind of been a part of the way humans eat. And, I think that was like the first processing of food. It looks different now than what it did then.
Definitely. Yeah. Because they were talking also in the article about kefir, which is like a fermented milk drink, and some interesting things around cheese necklaces. So I don't know when I'm buried. I'm going to be buried with my cheese necklace on.
Cheese necklace. Give me my cheese necklace and my bottle of kombucha. Bury me happy.
Anyway, go back and read that article. It's really interesting.
Okay. All right. Let's do some myth busting here. This article, let me pull it up here. Okay, it is called 10 Things I Learned in Nutrition School That Are Completely Wrong. And it's written by a dietitian. And this article's it's a good read. And she starts out by saying, yeah, I went to school a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I stopped learning. And so when I say something about nutrition and someone says to me, oh yeah, but you went to school so long ago, she kind of like responds with, okay, but I didn't just like stick with what I learned then and never study or do continuing education or anything. So this is actually a nicely written article, and she has a fresh take and perspective and a nice open mind as she kind of hits back at the trolls that were bugging her. Lisa, sorry, that's twice I've done that now. I think I did that last week too. Sorry, Leah, what were your thoughts on this article?
Yeah, I really like this article too. She does give a fresh perspective on it. And I was thinking I was going to be almost rude and say it's a really good article for a dietitian. And then I thought, no, that's not really a nice thing to say, because there is some fantastic dietitians out there. But you know what I mean? Like,
no dietitian shaming. We won't.
Yeah, I know, no
dietitian shaming.
No, but to have this open mind, I think, is really good, because there are some, and there's lots of people out there that are very closed-minded about nutrition facts. And so to have some of these different viewpoints to mainstream nutrition, I think is refreshing, and hopefully sees more of a change coming through for the newer generations of nutritionists that are coming and dietitians that are coming through.
Yeah. I liked the very first thing she started off with was the myth number one, or thing number one, is that fat people should always lose weight. And I just thought this was a good one to start with, because that is, I think, a general assumption that people in the nutrition and health space think, is that just because someone is overweight that they want to lose weight, or that their weight is somehow a reflection of their health also, and I know we've talked about that before, but this first one, it just kind of reminded me to take it back to the conversation we had with Lucia around just being accepting of your body, and sometimes being healthier is your goal, and being healthier is not always correlated with also being thinner. And so I think that it was just a nice point to make there to start off with.
Yeah. And I think also the other thing that Lucia said too was, but if you want to lose weight, that's fine too. Like there was no more of this kind of shaming, because it was always around like, we must lose weight. And then it was, now actually I want to lose weight, but now I'm ashamed to say it, because now we've switched it back and it's all about the need for being healthy. Like, I feel like it's just whatever your priority is, and whatever makes you healthier in whatever way that is for you. So for some people, maybe they are happy with the size of their body and they feel comfortable with that, but then the priority is that, we want to make sure the insides are healthy as well, because there's thin people out there that are eating a diet that's total rubbish and not healthy on the inside as well.
Yeah,
I'm always such a fence sitter on these ones, aren't I? I just always like take all points of view. That's how I feel when we're going through these.
Yeah, sometimes things strike me, but I mean, I think I'm a fence sitter on this one too, because it is so like what you prioritize. Just because I'm prioritizing weight or something doesn't mean that you have to. And I think that's why I'm a fence sitter. It's because I'm not going to push my beliefs onto someone else. Yeah. And I want that in all across the board.
Yeah, that's right.
And then this other one, she talks about the calories. This one, it says, I'm just going to read a little bit from it here. She says, there are 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. And while technically a pound of body fat may contain around 3,500 calories, the entire concept of gaining weight by eating 3,500 extra calories, or losing weight by creating a deficit of 3,500 calories, often recommended as a daily deficit of 500 calories per day to lose a pound a week, is faulty. And I agree with this. And this is something that a lot of our guests on the show have talked about, this is something that we talk about, and it's that the calories in, calories out model is incredibly flawed, even though it is something that is still taught in nutrition school, and I think personal trainers are still teaching this and preaching this. And so I was glad that she brought this up here. Did you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I guess this one is a kind of a loaded one as well, because there's so many different opinions in it, because especially in the low carbon keto world, and I think we've talked about this before, because there's still, groups inside the group that believe that, calories do matter in terms of if you have weight to lose, then you will need to go into a calorie deficit in order to lose some weight. And then there's other rules that of thought are just like, no, you just eat until you feel satiated, until you feel full. You don't need to calorie count. So there's all these different approaches, which it's confusing for people. It's like, which one do you follow? I feel like, again, it's a bit fence sitting. You got to find the one that works best for you, because so long as you're still staying like eating nutrient dense foods, and you're healthy and you're feeling full and satiated, and you're not like eating less calories as opposed to making yourself go into starvation mode. And then some people see intermittent fasting as calorie deficit, but then we talked to a guest just recently, Ben, who was saying it's not really. So, it's like, it's difficult, isn't it?
And I think it comes down to, like, I take the experiences that people are seeing in their practice. They're seeing in clinical settings, and not just what hypothetically could happen in a lab. And I think it was Dr. Don Klum, and I don't know if it was on my episode with him or if it was another conversation I was listening to him, but he explained this really well, and it just kind of made sense to me. But he says that there's two sides to this story. One is the calorie concept itself, and that a calorie is just a measure of potential energy. And when they figure that out, it is calculated in a controlled environment that does not represent our body. It's almost impossible to count calories in our meals because the equation is inaccurate from the get-go. I think when they do those things in like the lab, there's like a 25% buffer region or something like that. So if they're saying something has 4 calories, that's with give or take a margin of 25% error. So that's really kind of inaccurate to start with. And so it's really just impossible to count calories in our meals because the equation is inaccurate. And then the second thing is that our bodies, they're a dynamic system, and it has a lot of variables. So when we're talking about weight gain or weight loss or muscle gain and muscle loss, we're talking about a hormonal state more than just a caloric state. And he talks about how our body is a demand driven machine, not a supply driven machine. And just because you give it something doesn't mean you'll do what it wants. So just because you eat a bunch of protein doesn't mean that you're going to build a lot of muscle. It doesn't work like that. You have to create the demand for the macronutrients and for the calories. And in this example, like the exercise is to build muscle, you need to have those materials, the proteins, the building blocks to create it. So you have to create that demand by your lifestyle, your hormonal status. And basically his explanation is just that hormones trump calories every time in every situation.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And it makes sense to me. Like that resonates with me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think there's a lot in this, which is probably a whole episode of debate.
We'll have to have someone on.
Yeah, we'll get someone on
to do a whole episode on this.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. Well, speaking of
flawed,
I was going to say, speaking of flawed calculations or calculations that are hard and difficult to understand, the BMI. So she talks here about the myth is the BMI is a great way to determine health. And basically it was built in the 1830s, so long ago, for resource allocation for the war, and it wasn't actually even as an individual health indicator. But then I guess, and then even apparently the guy who invented it said it shouldn't even be used as it's being used today. So it was built for something completely different, and then we've picked it up and used it. And then how many times do people talk about BMI? Like even when you're doing like something online or filling out something, someone's like, what is your BMI? And it's always being used as an indicator to see whether you're obese or underweight, or, you know, it's like categorizing everybody into this. And it's just faulty. And everybody knows most people know it's faulty. I don't know why we're still using it. And it doesn't take
I think we have this love affair with using faulty tests.
Yes. I think like people would have to take it back then and be like, no, I use it, it works. Because if I was to say, no, it didn't work, then like all these hundreds of clients I've serviced using BMI are going to come back and be upset about it.
So because of ego, we continue to use things that don't work.
That's
Got
right.
it.
I don't know. I'm only theorizing here. I don't use it, that's for sure. And it's, it doesn't take into account a person's fat to lean mass ratio, their body structure. So because some people are just bigger than other people, and the location of the fat in their body. And all of these can make a huge difference to someone's health. So it's not a good indicator of measurement. I think most people, except for all those people that are using it, like personal trainers who actually only do a small amount of nutrition course usually, might get in trouble for that now. You know, it's just it's not something that we should be using, in my opinion.
I agree.
Okay. Well, I'm going to look at the next
right.
one too, because I just like the myth that margarine is heart healthy. I don't even want to go there with this one. It's just like this show will turn into Leah gets on her soapbox. And anytime I see, I'm so judgmental towards margarine. Anytime I see anyone talking about margarine, buying margarine that I know, I won't go up to a complete stranger. Anyone that enters into a discussion with me about margarine and says that it's good for them, I will refer them to this video that shows how margarine is made. And you will never eat this again, because it is like chemicals piled together. It's gray, and then they color it yellow. So nothing healthy whatsoever in margarine. Anything that's good for the heart, take that container and throw it in the bin.
I'm making a note to link that video in the show notes. So if you're listening, go look for that video link so you can break up with margarine right
break up
away.
with it. And the other thing that really upsets me too is like when people get older, this is what they do in Australia, and I'm sure it happens everywhere. They go to the doctor and the doctor's like, oh, you need to cut down on the beautiful butter that you're eating because, you know, of your health, and you've got to look after your heart. Please go and eat some margarine. Oh, no, thank you. Like, how can that be healthy in any case? Like, please exchange this beautiful fat, beautiful butter we're made out of very few ingredients for something with 20 billion things in it.
Yeah. I do like how she says that she was guilty of shaming people for butter. She said, I'm guilty of saying that margarine is one molecule away from plastic. And I now realize that that was food shaming, and I won't say it now. Well,
sorry.
I don't think she's wrong. Because let's just say, okay, if you are someone who eats margarine became popular purely because of marketing. There is nothing healthy about it. Just look at the back of your tub that it is sitting in and see the dozens of ingredients listed on there. That is mostly chemicals. I don't think that's food shaming. That's just fact. Like you are eating a tub of chemicals. Whether it's like plastic, I don't know, but just give me the butter.
That's right.
All right. The next one that she talks about is too much protein causes kidney failure. And this is actually really interesting because it's a topic that's been circling around lately. And our buddy Jimmy Moore actually was just talking about this on a recent episode of his show, Livin' La Vida Low Carb. He is talking about a study that was published in the July 2021 issue of Current Opinion in Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Obesity. I will link up the article in the show notes. But basically, it's a UK-based low-carb general practitioner and health researcher, and his research team, they wanted to examine the current evidence in the research literature regarding the impact of protein consumption on kidney function, because this has been around, I think even as the article author that we're talking about, she's been like, this has just been a thing since like the Atkins diet was popular. I don't think before, I'll have to look into it, but I don't think before low carb diets became really popular that anyone ever talked about kidney failure or kidney problems from too much protein. But anyway, so they did this study and they were comparing disease progression, kidney function and disease progression, and comparing it to what this physician has seen in his own clinic using low carb diets for the past 7 years. Jimmy did a really good job of breaking it down, and he's so much better at the sciencey stuff than I am. So I will link up that episode in there if you want to hear the nitty gritty of it. But basically, it hasn't really ever been proven, and our bodies can handle plenty of protein.
I feel like, this is one of those myths that they just make up when they're trying to demonize these diets that they're not impressed by. Yeah, I don't really have any much more to add there, but it's good that they're doing some actual scientific research on it so that they can dispel that myth, because it's definitely been something that's been circulating around the community for quite some time. And a lot of these myths remind me of my friend Marty Kendall, who we had on the show like ages ago, and he talked about, he wrote a book, it's called Big Fat Keto Lies, I think. And some of the research and stuff that he's done in that book will definitely, if you haven't read it or want to have a look at it, you can go and get that from him, Marty Kendall. I can link that up as well. And it'll go a bit more deeper into some of these subjects that we're talking about as well.
That just kind of reminds me, it's like, if you're looking for research on something, no matter what, like you can always find a research study or an article or something to support what you want, what you're looking for, or what you want the answer to be. And so I don't know necessarily like what the right or wrong answer is, and so that's why I think it's just so important to kind of do your own research and do like you're your best like science experiment. How does your body respond to things? How do you feel? There are lab markers you can check. And so even if something is saying, a study is saying, oh yeah, it's actually safer, we have to always circle back to bio-individuality. So don't let a study tell you either way. Just kind of like do your own research is what I'm trying to say.
That's right.
And the other one I wanted to talk about, she talks about how we need dairy for calcium. And this one's funny because it's just, clever marketing striking again, because it was the cereal industry that actually coined the phrase. Wait, hold on. I'm going backwards. Anyways, nope. Sorry, cross that out. I'm getting my two things. We'll go back to grains.
Oh, grains.
Sorry,
I'm really fascinated.
Ahead.
I'm really fascinated how this the cereal companies got involved in milk.
I think it was a coup. It was a coup. They said you got to push the milk because the cereal and they go together.
I was like, hey, fascinating.
Maybe. You know what? I don't think that's too far fetched, but I will come back to that. But the milk, like that whole milk does a body good, and you need milk for calcium. That very much was a result of marketing, and the only reason dairy was even put into the food pyramid was because of lobbying. Yes, calcium is important. Is dairy the best source? Not necessarily. So
especially like when there's so many intolerances people have these days to it, like it just seems like just about everybody you're talking to is trying to switch over to oat milk, which is a whole nother story in itself, because of some kind of dairy intolerance. And it's like, yeah, you can get your calcium from leafy greens, nuts, different things. You don't have to be drinking a glass of milk every day to get the calcium needs out of it, especially if you're not feeling great when you're drinking milk or eating cheese. I may be buried with my cheese necklace, but it doesn't mean I can eat it.
Yeah, calcium from dairy products they are about 30 to 35% bioavailable, meaning how much your body can actually pull the calcium out and use it. But other calcium rich foods, as you mentioned, that are more absorbable than dairy include fish with bones and cooked veggies like bok choy, kale, and broccoli. I know some like spinach is often recommended as a good source of calcium, but it's actually only like 5% bioavailable, but that's still something. So dairy is not the end all be all.
Yeah, if you want to boost your calcium, what about having a beautiful salmon dish with some bok choy and kale or something like that? That sounds pretty nice to me. Then put some butter on top.
Lots of butter. That'll do it. All right. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on in this article, Leah?
I think that we better talk about the grains since you gave a
Oh
teaser
yeah,
to the
since I brought
grains.
it up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tease you all.
Yeah. So low carb diets are harmful to our health, and that's a myth. And she actually debunks that, which I think is quite good. Well, she has a chat about it. So she's basically saying that as a dietitian, she used to recommend 8 to 11 servings of grain foods, which she could never do, or not give to everybody as a blanket recommendation. She does agree that she likes grains and she thinks they're good and shouldn't be vilified, but she doesn't agree that everybody should be treated the same way. You just have to think about people with diabetes and how many people, or insulin resistance, or metabolic health issues, and how many people there are with that, and then recommending 8 to 11 grains or servings of grain to them that's a recipe for death, basically. So
Reckless.
yeah so so she's just, I think one of the key points from that is basically like there's other things you could be doing or eating to crowd out the grains. So maybe sweet potatoes or some kind of starches might be a little bit better, or just eating veggies. Like I just always recommend crowd it out. You don't need that bread on the plate. You can just have more veggies on the plate, or I love a bunless burger, or like a burger salad. Like that's my favorite kind of thing to have, just have all the makings of the burger spread over the plate. I think that's really good.
Yeah. And I always get the visual of like when we talk about cows, like our cattle are sent to be grain finished because grain fattens them up. So just what does it do to us?
That's right.
Probably the same thing.
Exactly. One thing I do like about there's a few other things. So if you're interested in the article, you can go back and have a look at them. I don't think we need to go into too many more of them. But I do like the last kind of bit that she has in the article. And it's just like nutrition is always changing, and it can be frustrating for the layperson and often dietitians to see changing recommendations, but no, they're changing because we're learning more and we know more better than we did before. And that's a good thing. And I just love that. That's like a really refreshing approach to all of this, is like, if we can just think about everybody that's kind of set in their ways about certain biases and things that, they worked for them, doesn't mean it's always going to work for everyone else. And as we learn more, be adaptable to that change and not resisting to it.
And I think a lot of the frustration and the confusion can also go away if you just stop listening to the advice that comes from people with a financial interest in what they tell you, or financial investment in what they tell you. I think the best visual for me, or in that I always recommend to my clients, is when it's come to eating, is this something that humans have been eating or doing since the beginning of time, or is this something that is new? Yeah. And that is that's my barometer.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps keep things simple.
And was this coming from the earth, or is this coming from a factory?
Right.
That usually determines that. Get that margarine. I'm margarine shaming. Throw it in the bin. Anyone that's listening, throw it in the bin.
I will margarine shame.
All right. Well, I think that's the end of today's episode. Thanks, Holly. We've been debunking a lot of myths there. Our theme music is created by Andrew Bowden and production services by Ken Kevin Kennedy Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week.